So hi, my name is Cujo, and I'm going to talk about a game called Delusion that I finished the other night. Overall, I really loved this game, and this game pulled me in like instantly when I booted it up. I'd been really interested in it because it has like a PS1 art style, and the only game I've ever seen where like the sky is completely pink and the fantasy characters look wild, like stuff that I've never seen. It looked like an acid trip of a game. I went into playing it fairly blind and very quickly realized that there is a ton of dialogue in this game. There's a lot of sitting and talking to people, and sometimes you can end up sitting and talking to someone for like 10 to 15 minutes, which is not inherently a bad thing. That can be a really good thing in terms of like world building, but for not knowing what I was in store for, it took me back a bit because I thought I would be exploring a lot more, which there is quite a bit of. The game took me about 23 hours to complete, but a bulk of this game is just a lot of plot development, developing the world, and then developing the characters, which if you're just wanting to dive into a world, a fantasy world that is completely unfamiliar to the world that we live in, this is a game for you. This game is wonderful. It reminds me a lot of Morrowind and old school games like Arcanum. I'm going to explain the story of this game, and hopefully that kind of sells you and makes you interested at least in the plot of the game, because if that's not the thing that sells you in playing this, the other aspects of this game is not going to be the thing that sells you. So when you start this game, you wake as a prisoner of the Inquisition of the game, which are enforcers of the Apostatic Union. So pretty much what happens is like little blood dude in a coffin called the High Confessor gives freedom to prisoners of the Inquisition in exchange for completing the Inquisition's goals. For you in particular, you're immediately tasked from the beginning of the game to capture Vela Kalos. The world in this game is pretty interesting because gods almost are like how prophets are in our world. Like gods are very leveled in terms of their relation to humans, and you can either like join a god and work for a god, or you can turn on a god. There was a couple gods in my playthrough that I ended up killing because you just get that option with a lot of the gods, but there's a lot of like factions wanting to embrace gods and let chaos kind of ensue, and there's a lot of human factions trying to gain control over these gods, notably the Inquisition, and try to like keep order inside of a inherently very chaotic fantasy land. So in order to reach Vela Kalos, you are tasked with going to different islands on the land, which shift around with the land. In my playthrough, they didn't shift around, and I don't necessarily know if they're supposed to in a specific amount of time. But in the lore, the islands shift around over time, which makes it extremely hard for the Inquisition or any of the realms in general to find order. And you end up going into 3 different separate realms to try to recruit these people. There's a lot more than 3 realms, but there's 3 major realms to recruit Vela Kalos' original gang to try to pursue her. And to avoid spoiling the game to you and telling you like the results of the game, that's a lot of the basic setup to a lot of the events that happen in the game. I probably could have got 30 to 35 hours out of the game because there was a lot more quests, but around the 23-hour mark, I was getting this sense of urgency that I was getting bored and I wanted to complete the game. And the reason for that being, sadly, is I think a lot of the combat in the game. I think if the game itself had the combat and like the spell and fighting system that it had without the story, I would give this game like a negative review because it's very bare bone and straightforward or simplistic is how I would call it. So about after like 5 or 10 hours, like you kind of seen it all. And my strategy for playing through Delusion is like get a great sword, get the spell that makes you run really quick, and then you just charge up like a charged attack and then run up really quick to something and then run away. There's like a whole parry system and block system that I never used because you could just run around really quickly and just stab stuff, and it couldn't turn around quick enough to hit you. But if you were more so to like roleplay this a lot more and not allow yourself to play it like a video game, there's like a whole character building system that limits you to being able to only do certain things in the world depending on what you build into. There's 4 main attributes of the game, and those are might, guile, wisdom, and persona. Might is the one that I put the most stats into, but I put a decent amount of stats into the other ones. But might ends up affecting your attack and defense. Guile ends up affecting your lockpick and agility. Wisdom affects your lore and your spellcasting, and persona ends up affecting your charm and your barter. The leveling system also in Dread Delusion is not strengthened through combat like most RPGs. The way that you level up in Dread Delusion is through exploration. You have to find these blue skulls that are floating throughout the world, and when you collect them, they will give you Dread XP to level up. You also get Dread XP from completing quests, but a majority of the XP that you're going to get is through exploring and picklocking and breaking doors and getting into places you should or should not be. But you can explore enough in the game where you can level things enough to where you can see most of the content if you really wanted to. I personally built up might the most, and so I would just like smack into broken doors mostly and like destroy in combat. When I run around in this world, it is a very beautiful world. Like, it is an eye treat. It is eye candy. And a lot of like the new areas that you can run into, you can just like stop and look around and just kind of admire stuff as you're walking around. Like, a lot of the time I would just completely avoid enemies and just kind of look at stuff and like the warping textures. I don't know, there's something about that PS1 style that just is like really intriguing, and this game visually and narratively is like phenomenal. This is why I played it all the way to the end. Whoever wrote the story like created a lot of good world building, super interesting factions, alongside like very tragic things that happen, as well as extremely comedically funny things. There's a few moments I even showed my girlfriend like some of the notes that you could discover that just had really bad grammar, and it had us cracking up. So overall, would I recommend Dread Delusion to the average gamer? Actually, probably not, because this is like for the boomer gamer or someone like just wanting to chill and like eat snacks and drink soda pop and kind of just like look at eye candy and get into a fantasy world that is completely unfamiliar. Because in terms of dopamine and flashing colors and creating like extremely engaging gameplay and super like flashy colors and like doing stuff, like a lot of this game is like a walking sim, which is probably like something I should talk about. So I'm gonna go on a side tangent. A lot of this game I used the spell that makes you run extremely quick. I pray that whoever watches this finds that spell early on in the game, because you will end up using that spell a ton. And that was like one of the only spells I really used. Since I focused on might, I'm sure that's the reason why. But even with only having a little bit of leveling in magic almost seems kind of useless, except for running speed spell or the return home spell or the return to your ship spell. Other than that, magic is honestly kind of useless. There was one play session I had in Dread Delusion where I used the running fast spell, and it glitched where the spell stayed on even when the duration of the spell ran out. So I didn't use a single spell and just let the glitch stay on while I ran around and got a ton of stuff done in the game. This game has an airship that it gives you way too late. Like, I'm not sure if there's a different way that you can get it earlier. I think I read through certain dialogues that you can, but by the time I got the airship in the game, it's like right at the end of the game, and I was just very much, I think, ready to be done playing the game. As much as I love the world, maybe if I balanced out this game with playing something else, I probably could have got through a lot more of it, but I was very much ready. That being said, awesome world, really good writing, amazing ending, and like a amazing narrative. I've never experienced a fantasy world like this. It's truly unique and very dark and horrific, and yet at the same time very comedic and absurd. I love it. I love this game a lot. So if you're into like plot and world building, if you like to read a lot, this game, highly recommend. The combat in the game itself is almost kind of a means to an end for you to get to a point where you're talking to somebody, and that's like the sweets, that's the cake, or the reward is talking to a character and finding different characters and gods to talk to and make decisions in the game. And if you're into that kind of stuff, just looking at pretty stuff and talking a lot to different characters, dude, this game is so good. Especially for someone like, for me, I'm getting a little bit older and I don't want to try to be a pro gamer. I just kind of want to sit down and enjoy like a world. It was just a trip to find the different characters and learn about the different ideas and ailments that your character can get from talking to like these fantasy characters. Anyway, I hope we get more games like this narratively, because Dread Delusion in the plot department is like so good. So anyway, yeah, just finished it. Just wanted to record some thoughts on it. Hopefully that educates someone either looking into getting the game or has seen it and is interested in it. And if you played through the game, I'm curious to hear about your thoughts down below. If you watched to this point, I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. And I love you very much, and goodbye now.
I spit fire, I'm like Bowser from the fire. I'm retired. Fuck my teachers, call them liars. Read and write.